Hey Kickstarter backers, I wanted to show you a new game called Honey. Honey was developed initially during the summer internship and later picked up by Dan King, our lead game designer. And so while I wish he could be here to explain it to you, I'll do my best. It's one of my favorite games. So in Honey, each one of these blinks becomes a flower. And you can see a little bee on each of these flowers ready to gather pollen. The way you gather pollen is to click or tap these up and you can see the flower fill up with pollen. When it fills entirely, it'll let you know by pulsing solid across the whole surface. And that means it's ready to either give its pollen to a worker bee or upgrade into a worker bee. You upgrade by holding down a single blink, like so, and that suggests that this flower will now also upgrade into a bee. The cool thing about the bee tiles is that a bee tile will automatically make the flowers it's attached to generate pollen, and so they gather the pollen. And so you can see this worker bee is getting fed pollen from the flowers. Over time, the worker bee is going to fill up with honey, and it's going to need somewhere to give that honey to. And so let's see. So we've got a filled bee and 2 filled flowers. So let's go ahead and let's see. Let's evolve this one into a bee. So we've got 2 worker bees. We're going to evolve one of them into a brood. And what a brood is it's like a worker bee, but it accepts honey from the worker bees to turn it into royal jelly. This is not exactly based on fact. This is a little bit of a different ecosystem than real world, but it's a game, we're having fun, and it's still a pretty neat ecosystem. The brood can only receive honey from a worker bee. And so now we've got a chain of 3 flowers feeding the worker bee, and the worker bee passing off its honey to the brood. Of course, the brood is not the end of the game. We all live to serve the queen, and the goal of the game of Honey is to satisfy the queen as quickly as possible, because otherwise this hive ain't gonna be a cool place to live. So let's see, the quickest way to feed our queen, well, we first need a queen. So we'll have to get as much pollen to our bee to create honey, our bee to create as much honey as possible to the brood, and then we'll be able to upgrade our brood to a queen bee. And we'll probably want to upgrade our worker bee to a brood and one of our flowers to a worker bee. With 6 blinks, there's a number of different ways you can make this arrangement, but the game comes with the add-ons, so you're playing Honey with 12 blinks, and there's a really neat optimization problem of how quickly you can feed the queen. And so now we've got a queen bee, we'll upgrade to a brood, and then let's upgrade one of our flowers to a worker bee. And I'm gonna surround that worker bee. Maybe you can make something like this. I tend to like to build them symmetric. It doesn't really matter. And this bee is receiving essentially 3 pollen per second. So if you have more blinks, you can make higher pollen per second hives and get your queen bee to fill up quickly. I'm not going to spoil it in this video, but when the queen fills up, and we can see the brood is almost full. So when the brood is full, it'll pass on to the queen. When the queen fills up, there's a little surprise. All right, so that's Honey, and I look forward to shipping Honey your way. Peace.